jump there in the audio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special stream tonight. This is my first Muzzle Run stream. I'm joined tonight by founder Tom Hickman. Tom, how are you doing tonight? Oh, I lost your audio, Tom. Hold on one sec. Chat, let me know if you can hear Tom.
Well,
Oh, you're back now.
should
Okay.
be good now. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, going good, mate. How are you going?
Great. So happy to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. Um, I know a lot of people in chat tonight. I see a lot of first timers in here. Thank you so much for popping in. Want to give a shout out to Henchman Sports for the follow a minute ago. CJ Butterman for the follow a few days ago. I know a lot of you probably familiar with Muzzle Run with Tom, and I see a lot of people too from my community who may not be as familiar. So some of this may be already known by some of you, but we're going to start with a little background on Tom, talk about Muzzle Run as a whole, and then we're going to talk about Muzzle Run Football, the latest game coming out. So, Tom, I've got to know, how did you come up with this idea to start a Greyhound racing game in Web3? Where did that come from?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, over the last few years, there's been a few Web3 games that have popped up and sort of been a really good use case for NFTs. Especially the racing side of things sort of hit home for me. I've always loved the idea of owning a share of a racehorse or owning my own racehorse, but I wasn't that involved with the people in the industry and things like that. It was just a little bit too difficult. So when I learned about that sort of utility for NFTs, I just thought that was really, really good use case for something that I wasn't captivated with in the first instance. So I started playing some Web3 racing games and explored a little bit. And I'm a software developer, self-taught software developer and entrepreneur. So I thought, let's run a few experiments. Let's learn a bit of Web3 and see what we can build. And I personally have a Greyhound myself. I think a lot of people, when they first played those horse racing NFT games, thought this would be great for Greyhounds. It was like
Yeah,
obvious.
right.
And because I actually have a Greyhound and I'm passionate about Greyhounds, it just made sense. We never really wanted to create something that competed directly with those games. We wanted to sort of work in tangent with them. And so we really, we started off Muzzle Run with not a huge amount of expectations. It was really just a project for us to learn Web3 and experiment. One thing led to another and built a little bit of a community around it who are really passionate. And then just decided to sort of go all in and really flesh it out and build it. And we just sort of been going strength to strength from there.
That's incredible. I mean, I've been we talked about this a little bit prior, but I've been following the Muzzle Run journey now, on and off from afar. And just to see how far you've come in terms of presentation, website, just the tech on the site itself and getting everything kind of connected, your new analytics that you just released look really nice. It's been really, really cool to see someone grow regardless of what the state of the current NFT Web3 gaming space is. You just seem to keep on going. And I know your community is incredibly passionate and supportive of everything that you've done. So big props to you there. I've got to know, have you
Thanks.
been a gamer before, or was this just kind of a fit that you felt, or do you have any background or history in gaming at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, growing up, I had all the PlayStations and Nintendos, and I was obviously a massive fan. As I left school, I sort of drifted away from that. I didn't get too involved with the sort of modern day gaming, but I still loved, playing your. You probably don't know the game. It's an iconic over this side of the world. Your John Loma rugby games, but
Okay.
FIFA and all of those sort of traditional iconic games. I love them, and I still do to this day. I'm not massive into those like your League of Legends and um, Fortnite. That's not really my vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously I've played a lot of sport games specifically
Okay.
growing up, and then I'm an entrepreneur. I started off as an entrepreneur, and I learned software development to progress in that area. And one of the things that I was dabbling in the entire time was making games. And that's what I discovered pretty quickly was making games was more fun than playing games. I was
Yeah.
like, playing games is fun, but making games is a whole nother level. And probably about 5 years ago, I said, I don't know where I'm going to end up or how this is going to progress over the next 5 years, but if I can come to work and make games, I will just enjoy going to work every day. So it's
Mhm.
just funny how everything sort of shifted to align itself like that. Um, we've got other areas of the business, we've got other softwares, business applications and stuff, but it's quite an easy choice to put our attention into this area because it's so fun and we get it and it works. Like we are getting positive validation in a really tricky market right now.
Yeah.
Having those that other software, we're really fortunate in that fact because it keeps the bills being paid at times when we can hit some bumpy roads. But we do believe in the long term vision, and I think the community here, while they all understand blockchain technology, they're not specifically here because it's an NFT greyhound racing game. It's more about the experiences that we're creating, and this is just the medium in which they're experiencing it. So regardless of what ends up happening with regulatory requirements and stuff with blockchains, NFTs, and all of that, like I'm a massive fan, a big advocate for it, and very bullish in the long term. But regardless of what happens, we see that investing in this specific area and industry as a good long term play, regardless.
That's awesome. We got a question from chat, just kind of circling back to you said earlier you have a greyhound.
Yeah.
Have you ever raced any hounds in real life? Question from Dave the Bowler.
So my greyhound is an ex-racing greyhound.
Okay.
In New Zealand, greyhound racing is actually quite large. So I know in America it's not that big, but in New Zealand it's quite big. There's greyhound racing every day, same as Australia and I think the UK too. So you can't get a greyhound in New Zealand unless it's an ex-racer. It's an industry that protect that lineage and the bloodlines and stuff
Wow.
quite
Okay.
a lot. So all greyhounds in New Zealand are ex-raced. Um, so he wasn't very good, but I bet on his family quite a lot
Okay.
because he's got a really good dad, Gordon Bale. So I bet on his family. So yeah, I mean I've punted on them, but I've never actually owned a greyhound and entered them into a race. But that's definitely in the short term vision. I'm keen to bring one on for Muzzle Run, run a bit of a giveaway, and give a player 50% of the stake
That
in
would
that
be
dollar.
awesome. That would be so cool. Like bridge real life with Web3 in a very cool way. So what I mean, chat's blowing up tonight like crazy. I appreciate you all coming in here. We got so many new names in here, so many OGs from way back in the day. Just a ton of new followers that just popped in. Real Sheffy, Jeff Mason 20, Pause 3D, No Sky 111, Menacing Mouse. Thank you all for the follow. Um, so chat's blowing up. You've progressed this game. What do you think has made Muzzle Run different, and how has that led to your success?
When obviously I played a few Web3 racing games first, and I sort of just picked the areas that I really liked, and avoided the areas that I could see were a little bit difficult or were people were having trouble in, and tried to just model Muzzle Run off of that. I guess you could say I learned from the mistakes that they made, whether or not they admit them as mistakes is debatable, but ultimately Muzzle Run is a simplified version of the Web3 racing breeding sort of dynamic. So we sort of came up with an idea of, okay, what would be the most amazing thing that we could build? And let's simplify it so that it's really easy to get started, really easy for people to jump in at any level, at any point, whether or not they've been around since the beginning or they're just coming in, and have a competitive chance and a road to actually succeed, while still providing the in-depth a study that could go on for people to really become experts in the game. So yeah, it's a little bit of that simplified approach that I think has made us a little bit different, giving people a shot regardless of their budget. People have come in with a 2-matic dog and one 5,000 matic and a Group 1 Rickettson Elite,
Oh,
providing those sort of opportunities. And then on top of that, one of the things that like I personally realized about myself, and it's the same with the team here, is that we make like good game decisions. Like we make games fun, just in general. Like not outside of the Web3. Growing up, my friend always used to ask me, "Okay, Tom, what's the rules? What's the rules of the cricket game we're about to play?" For
yeah.
instance, and I come up with these like cool rules, and there's a little bit of a catch and things like that. And it's those little small dynamics at play that we've sort of integrated into Muzzle Run along the way that I think makes it a little bit addictive. There's certain aspects in the game outside of the racing that people come on and participate in that forms a massive part of the game. You would think it would be all about the greyhounds racing, but there's little bugs all over the place. Like the training, having a little bit of a gambling element to that,
Mhm.
or a chance element. The breeding, being able to open up anything at any time, and the whole execution of that. It's very unique, and I don't think anyone else has quite replicated or doesn't quite have the style that we have in that area. So yeah, that's what probably makes us a little bit different, and you're going to see that flow on into the football, which I'm really excited about, because there's going to be a lot of new fresh players coming in, and they're going to experience that for the first time, and I think you'll see that a lot of them will find that those aspects quite addicting and fun to participate in.
You said a few words there of addicting, simplified, and kind of easy, but there's like a layer of depth to it.
Yeah.
And I've literally heard multiple people say those exact same things, those exact same words about this game from your community. So I love that that is so aligned and that is so in sync. I think that's really, really cool. I just had to point that out. So
Awesome.
with football, why pivot into football? What brought that about?
Well, we've been thinking about it probably since January in 2023, about expanding on Muzzle Run, whether or not that's expanding on the greyhounds, into the whippets, into horse racing, into other sports. It's something that's always been sort of part of our plan, because we know that user acquisition is vital in order for these games to survive. You need new, fresh players coming in. When we launched Muzzle Run, we did manage to capture quite a few users that are in the Web3 racing space specifically, and they weren't too fussed whether or not it was horse racing, dog racing, car racing. They just knew how to get started. They knew what it was about, and they started playing. Over the year, we've had, the market has been much tougher to acquire new users. And we realized that if we're going to open up some new acquisition channels coming in, we're going to have to branch out into an area that has a super passionate, big global audience. So there was a few different options on the table, and yeah, we ended up moving down the football or soccer route, for a few different reasons. The first one being that our main markets, which is USA, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, they all play soccer and have super passionate pockets of audience that play soccer. Secondly, is we know the game quite well. I've followed soccer throughout my life. I understand it. It's not like I'm building something completely new. And then the third point is that we ended up actually creating some prototypes of a few different games, and football worked really well in the simulated environment that we're trying to execute here. So that's why we chose football. One of our strengths as a development company is our ability to bring something from concept to production quickly. I think as you get bigger as a development company, from what I've seen, that becomes a more drawn out and complex process. We're still lean and agile. We have the ability to implement these pretty quickly, which I think you saw with the stats. We didn't get
Yeah.
much notice from Hawkeye that they were going to be going, but we managed to get those into production pretty quickly. So we have a process there, and that strength is a great user acquisition tool in itself. Every time you bring out something new, it puts more eyes on the project. So by putting something into production, even just a small feature that's positive sentiment and will get new eyes on the project. If you can then bring in a whole new game, then that's a massive advantage and a massive strength that we have, and we'd be foolish not to execute on that. So we've put together a roadmap and a game and a plan that we feel confident that we have the ability to deliver in 2024. And that's what you're seeing unfold right now.
So, with first question, backing up a little bit, who's your favorite football club?
Liverpool.
Oh no! Oh no! I'm a Man City supporter, so we had a great match this past weekend.
When I
Um,
was growing up, my cousin, who's like my brother, he was a big football fan first, and he was a fan of Manchester United. So I had to pick someone different,
all right, yeah, I mean it could be
and
Man U. So,
just followed on from there.
um, just checking chat real quick. So with I appreciate the question, Galaxy Racing. We will get to that for sure. Um, with Greyhound Racing, soccer, football, is there a plan to continue down with other sports games, leveraging similar styles in the future, and really create kind of a whole muzzle ecosystem, if you'll call it that? Or are you going to stop with soccer, let that grow, see how that goes? What is your kind of vision for the
Yeah.
company?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and we need to be careful because I get so excited and wanting to start the next one before this one's even off the ground. But we have a vision of a multi-sport simulated platform with the Muzzle Run ecosystem. Obviously, we've communicated a roadmap and stuff for 2024 that we believe we can execute with the small team that we have. So we know that we're going to have to grow internally, but I think that's all going to sort of happen organically as soccer gets bigger and we bring new users on, and there's more budget and allowance to hire the right people, a couple more superstars on the team. We will have the ability to execute on another game. So we'll just sort of grow as quickly as the market sort of allows us to. But sports betting platforms is a good sort of comparison to where we see ourselves, the vision that we see ourselves. So if you think about your Bet 365s and
Yeah.
your Ladbrokes and that, it's a platform that allows you to navigate and select different areas, different options all the time. There's something going on. Are we going to bet on boxing this weekend? Are we going to bet on soccer on Monday? And just providing lots of different opportunities and providing the same sort of experience as those platforms. That's where I see Muzzle Run. But the difference being the fact that you actually own these assets, you own the teams and the players, and eventually there will be people betting on those on those assets, on those outcomes of those races and games. But in the beginning, it's going to be more effective. This is your soccer player. This is your soccer team that's in a match right now. You're not just betting on somebody else's. So that's sort of the long-term vision that I see. So yeah, over the next 3 to 5 years, we plan to add quite a few more games, provided the momentum keeps going,
Right.
and the community is happy with that.
Do you foresee with your agile team any possible hiccups with launching a second game and keeping Muzzle Run and development continuing? Granted, Muzzle Run is at a much later stage than football is, so probably can offload some of that. But how do you foresee navigating some of those potential challenges, if you see any challenges there at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some curveballs along the way, and we try and just get a little bit. We're trying to get better with our communication of deadline expectations, timelines. That's the biggest thing. We know we have the ability to execute and bring these into production, but something might pop up on Muzzle Run that requires a week's worth of development from a developer, and that's a big portion of your team. So we do have, first of all, we do have the ability to scale if we need to. We've been a software company for quite a few years now, and we do have connections and contractors that can jump on and help us straight away to fill in and help us grow and add a lot of more fuel to the fire really, really quickly if we need to. But in saying that, I don't foresee a massive issue with what we've planned for 2024. Muzzle Run has been developed like most of our other applications, and that is as automated as possible. We have lots of different schedulers running all the time, that allows us to step away from the PC, for a whole day and come back and everything is running perfectly fine. Everything we build with Muzzle Run, we think what's the most amazing feature that it could be, and then let's simplify it so that it's maintainable, and streamlined and easy for the players. So we just take that approach with everything. So now we're sort of getting to the point where Muzzle Run is self-sustaining itself, and we will have continuous improvements and updates on Muzzle Run because we want, well, the Muzzle Run racing, because we want people to understand that this whole vision is to grow the foundation, and we want to keep that improving, and it will. But yeah, we will allocate more resources to the football simply because we do now have the capacity. It's one of the main reasons why now is the time that we're looking at the football, is because we actually have the capacity now.
Love that. Really cool. And yeah, think about my site, the analytics and tools that I develop and run, I have a lot of the same philosophies. It's like, how can I do this in scale as economically as possible while providing a good experience? What do those tools look like? What is scheduled? What is not? How is that scheduled? Where is that running? And really making those decisions allows me to deliver, in my opinion, a pretty good output for being
Mm.
just a single person. So
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
I definitely, that resonates with me, and I love that. And I understand that. I get that. So very, very neat. So all right, we've talked a lot about football, but now let's actually talk about football. So you have now a new section on the Muzzle Run site, for the football pre-mint. We'll talk about the docs in a minute. I've got some questions about that. But for those of you already in the ecosystem that may have, transferred over, gotten some froth, you can buy a team for 29,500 froth. And that team is going to consist of a player, a trainer, a coach, a trainer, and 11 players. So if you're interested in that, check it out. The link just popped in chat, https://www.muzzle.run. Check that out. We've got some few questions in chat. I've saved most of them, but one I want to address right now is, do I have a kennel? And yes, I do have a kennel. I am MJ Gaming within Muzzle. I've not raced yet. I have one dog. Had to. And I also, just full disclosure, I did purchase 2 team packs for football already. I got in at the that half price Black Friday sale that you had going. It just seemed like too cool of an opportunity to pass up. So completely,
Nice.
not sponsored in any way. Did that on my own, just because I was so excited about it. We had chatted, and you offered to come on. So, one thing that you have on here is the actual docs itself. So if you click that, it's going to go to the section on your guide for Muzzle Run Football. So the way that the game is structured, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I've read through this about 3 or 4 times now. I've got some questions for you to make sure I'm understanding things correctly. And, the way you're talking about Muzzle Run, it's simple, but there's kind of a level of depth to it. I'm getting that feeling in reading this already. So there would be 3 types of NFTs. You've got coaches, players, and trainers. Mentioned that earlier. The coaches are needed to mint players. And there's no limit to how many players you can mint from a coach. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And then on the, if we go to the coaches mint page, I see here under point 3 that it says a coach would be approximately 10,000 froth. Is that also going to be correct, or is that going to potentially change?
That is what the price is estimated to be right now. Yeah.
Okay.
It does. We're launching froth on Uniswap on 5th of January, and it really depends on sort of where that moves as to
Sure.
how much froth it's going to. Obviously, we want to to create a price point that's reasonable for new users to come in at. So there is a potential that that would adjust if froth really goes up in value. Froth probably sidestepping here just a little bit, but froth for us provides two main sort of areas for people to look at. One is holding froth for the increase in value, and the second one is the utility in the game. So the utility in the game, we don't want that to become harder or act as a hindrance because the value of froth goes up. We want the utility in the game to drive um, the um, the need for froth. So that's why I'm mentioning that it may potentially change.
Sure.
It's likely that those numbers that you see there, so 10,000 froth, which is 100 Matic, will be tied to Matic.
Okay.
Matic, we think, is a lot more of a stable, even though it still can be quite volatile, a lot more stable of a currency than a new ERC20 token. And it's something that everyone's familiar with on the Polygon network. So it's likely that you'll see that actually tied to the price of Matic, and froth the amount in froth will go up and down.
Nice. So coaches themselves have a handful of abilities and skills: tactical, technical, vision, defense, offense, leadership, which makes sense. Like when you think about coaching in real life, coaches should have those skills. They should be able to address all aspects of the game and, in theory, influence the way a team plays and performs. Now, under the bottom here, it says special. So experience, the higher the experience, the more success players will have during big moments, big games, finding an edge on the field. And then a coach's experience grows over time based on their duration with the team, the number of games they participate in, and their victories. Larger scale matches contribute more significantly to the accumulation of experience. So I've got a few questions there off of that. So with this experience, coaches need to be attached to teams, and over time, that experience with that team grows. So if I have a coach that's been on my club for 2 months, and then I decide, hey, we're gonna swap out. There's this new coach out there. I want to try and get him in. He's built up, totally hypothetical, but he's built up, that 2 months of experience.
Yeah.
If I trade him to you see him, you pick him up, what happens to that 2 months of experience? What does that look like now on your team, on your club? Does that go back to zero? Is some of that held? What does that look like, if you can speak to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the experience will get brought over with the new coach. We're wanting sort of to replicate the idea that of why a real life team would hire a different coach. Why would they bring them over? Well, they're bringing them over for the fact that they're performing and have experience at the level that the new team is wanting to participate in.
Mhm.
So they'll bring that experience over with them. What it looks like as a whole overall is still to be completely ironed out. But I do see the coaches that bring a team to the top of the leagues and win the biggest competitions being where the main value is ultimately inside Muzzle Run Football, because it's just going to be so hard to achieve that level of experience that that coach has got, just because the way that it's structured, so few teams will ever reach that pinnacle. So there's only going to be a few coaches that actually end up getting that experience, at least in the short to medium term.
Wow. I love that. I think that's so cool. And that creates such a, again, simple but yet lifelike and depth within the dynamic of it, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Definitely got that. It's definitely got a lot of depth to it for the guys that really want to get involved, study the game, and reach the top. But then at the same time, it's going to be really simple just to pick up a team and start playing the game, or even just pick up a player and start playing the game, enter them into a group match and start playing and experiencing it. And yeah, different earning opportunities along the way. That's one of the major things that I want to make sure is that regardless of when someone finds out about the game, they actually have an opportunity to earn. They can see that opportunity. There's an entry point that's a price that's reasonable, regardless of the time that they've discovered the game. And then there's actually a clear path for them to becoming a profitable player.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think that will do a lot for your, accessibility and approachability in the future, which I think is really smart. So the players are minted by coaches. Coaches are attached to teams. We had a question in chat from the players, or about the players. Do we get to name the players? Dave the Bowler asks.
Yes, yeah, yeah, you do.
Oh
Naming
wow.
is quite big in Muzzle Run, naming your hound. And one of the things that, I think where we're going to be different from FIFA is the fact that we aren't going to be able to use your Messi and your Ronaldo. You're not going to be able to play with those players. So we really need to capitalize on the other aspect, which is creating a legacy around your own players. And we want to eventually have your Beckhams, but they will be the NFT that's created by MJ Gaming, who managed to get that winning penalty. Um, so yeah, it's all about creating a legacy um, and yeah, capitalizing on those sort of customizations that already work inside Muzzle Run.
Very, very cool. If I have a coach, I mint a player, maybe I don't have the budget, or I'm new to it. Maybe I just mint one or two players. Am I able to play, or do I need to mint 11 players? Is a coach's mint a full team of 11? What will that look like?
So you can come in and you can either purchase a player off the secondary market, just a single player, or there'll be an option to mint a player without having invested in a coach in the first instance. What that exactly looks like, I'm not sure, but something along the lines of the Breeders' Den inside Muzzle Run, for those that know that, just so that the option to get in at a reasonable price is there for people to experience the game. But you're not going to need a whole team or a whole club in order to play a game of football. So a big part of Muzzle Run and big part of Muzzle Run Football is discovery, understanding where your players' strengths are, and and um, and how they play in different situations, and the way in order to do that is to play them. So we've got group matches. So you basically just enter your player into a group match once there's enough players for that match to complete. So you got 11 players on each side. That will just play out like a real casual, friendly game between mates, and that's where people can sort of experience the game with just one or two players in the first instance. So it also will be a strong area for discovery early on.
Just took that question right out of my mouth. Very, very cool. And so, similar to the coaches, the players have similar abilities: offense, defense, mental ability, and form. And all these have kind of a stat from 50 to 100. So is that, I guess that's kind of my question, is will offense have a stat 50 to 100, defense, mental, will all those be individual stats, or will it be an overall stat of 50 to 100?
Yeah, no, they'll all be individual stats.
Okay.
So there are a couple. I can just sort of flesh that out just a little bit. You've got the so we'll start with the players. So you've got the players that have a certain amount of offensive ability. That offensive ability needs to be discovered. You don't actually know what that is off the bat, and that's not displayed on the card. The stat that you see on the card is the likelihood that they're going to be playing to the best of their ability, of their personal ability. So that discovery process is still going to be really, really big. And then the stat that you see on the card shows how likely are they going to be playing to the best of their ability. That's one of the aspects. And then if you go up a level, then you've got a coach, and he's got stats. So his stats obviously don't relate to himself. They relate to how will he affect your players in that specific area. So your coach's offensive area is also a multiplier on the player's offensive area, offensive stat. So
Gotcha.
there's going to be a lot to discover early on. There's going to be a lot of people frantically trying to figure out what's the best mixture of stats and things like that. But you may decide that you have an offensive heavy coach and an offensive heavy team, or you might find that defensive coach with an offensive team is something that works a bit better. You're just going to have to play and figure it all out. For us as well, as we create these simulations and watch it out, you see that there's lots of different options in the way that it'll go.
What so just to clarify that, then I guess I could almost think of that 50 to 100 on all of those stats as their consistency in a way. So for example, if I've got a player that is 100 on offense, he's going to be consistent, whether that's good or bad. He's going to be consistent.
Yeah, well, I think like if you think about it, like in traditional sport, you've got your Tom Brady's
Yeah.
that are really really good and really really consistent. So let's say he's 100.
Mhm.
And then you've got other, I can't think of one off the top of my head, quite a few rugby players I can think of,
Sure.
but every now and again they do something absolutely phenomenal, and you're like, this is a really really skilled player, but 80% of the time they're doing something weird that's costing the team the game.
Yeah.
So he would potentially have 100 ability with a really, really low consistency.
Sure.
So you are right. It is definitely, it could be looked at as consistency, but sometimes it may just be worthwhile putting in someone with a lower consistency that has the ability to pull off that amazing move in the dying
That's
moment.
oh man, you're getting me very excited talking about it. Just all the wheels are turning in my head right now. Very cool and very clear, easy explanation. I appreciate that. Um, will there be so you talk about the rarity distributions too. You don't mention what they are. Will that be public information at any point?
Yes, yep, it will be.
Okay.
Yeah, so the rarity aspect is an indicator of players' underlying abilities. But one of the biggest, one big aspect that we have inside Muzzle Run Greyhounds is a collectibles aspect. And we don't want to lose that. I think NFTs as collectibles work really, really well. And so it is also just an indicator of how rare that specific NFT is. And we provide incentives for people to hold whole collections, and that's going to carry on into the football side of things. So yeah, it's a good indication of underlying abilities, but at the same time, it forms part of the whole collectibles aspect. It's muzzle run collectibles, trading cards. So that's where that rarity really comes home.
Oh, awesome. Very, very cool. I'm a huge sports card fan. I just bought a bunch of packs and boxes this past weekend. So
Awesome.
yeah, very, very cool. I love that. I love ripping packs.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and like that was the same as me growing up in school. There was always something that was the phase just taken over the school that was going to be banned in a few weeks.
love that. Love that. So players also have experience. Is that going to fade if I have a player that's playing with me for a long time? I transfer them to your club, um, or sell them open market. You pick them up. Is that experience going to go with them or not?
Yeah, so you're not going to lose sort of experience on a player's perspective from moving them into a different team. There's going to be way more to consider in that aspect than focusing on experience alone. There's and like I don't want to give the wrong impression that it's going to be really hard to figure out, but we need to add these depths in the game for
Yeah,
longevity and to really create the edges for the people that really want to learn it. But certain players work better with certain other players and work better with certain other coaches. So that's probably one of the biggest areas that you're going to be considering moving him into another team. If he's working really well in that team, it's likely you've got a very congruent mix of players and a coach. And to take him out and put him into another team, that could potentially lower his abilities to perform. Similar to how teams just certain players just like playing for certain teams. You get Fernando Torres moving from Liverpool to Chelsea, and then he
yeah,
retires.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I had that in my notes right here to talk about chemistry, and what does that look like? Is that going to be a factor in things? And
Yeah.
so again, you're answering my questions before I can even answer or ask them tonight. I love it. I love it. And so I guess kind of the last part about this in a way is the trainers. And so they can improve the condition. And then so they focus on strength and conditioning of players. Trainers will be a part of the training process of each player. Trainer will be selected and assist with each training session, permanent and temporary. Trainers have skills stated which will impact training sessions of players. Uh, but there's I think I might have to find it here. Uh, what can a trainer impact and not impact, and what does that look like?
So bringing it, if you take a look at how we have it in Muzzle Run, you specifically wanting to target a particular attribute. So for instance, you're wanting to target speed. So you'll still have the ability to say, hey, I want to train my offense. So the trainer then will facilitate that. In Muzzle Run, it's really just up to an RNG to decide your outcome of that training session. Whereas the trainer implementation inside of the Muzzle Run Football adds another area of discovery, because now certain trainers are going to be better than other trainers just in general, and some trainers are going to be better offensive trainers. But it's all hidden information that's up to the end player to discover. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a mixture of discovery and frustration, I think, in the beginning. But the biggest advice that I would give in this particular area about trainers is just take that area slow. You've invested money in your team, rather spend some time figuring them out, and understanding where they need training or where they can capitalize on training, and then start experiencing with training, and seeing how that sort of impacts the player itself, and move from there. It's not going to be a massive deal breaker, so we don't want it to be like people be like, well, I need to throw this trainer away because he's absolutely useless. I need to get another one. But in the long term, there will be an edge that starts coming through between the good trainers and the bad trainers. So if you're really wanting to reach the top, at some point it might be worthwhile changing your trainer strategically for someone else.
Gotcha. And we got a question in chat from Sydney Cove. What's the difference between temporary and permanent training?
Sure. So permanent training affects the base statistics of the footballer. So the offense, defense, those ones. And then temporary training just affects the form. So the form of a player, obviously massive in real life. It's something that's going to be massive inside Muzzle Run Football too. So if your player's had a few bad games in a row, his form's going to drop. And if you want to think about which stat is the biggest impact on consistency, it's going to be form. So while those other stats are also, I guess, at the end of the day, boil down to consistency, this is going to be a multiplier of those. So you're going to want to have your players playing at maximum form in the biggest games possible. So you can achieve that through playing, but ultimately, there's going to be deadlines where people like, I need this player in the team, and I need his form high, and that's where the temporary training comes in, because you temporary train him, that is going to directly improve his form. So permanent training would have permanently increased those other base statistics, whereas form is a dynamic stat that goes up and down based on how a player plays, but training always is guaranteed to improve your form.
And that's going to be, the form will be very much on an individual level. So there's,
Yes.
I might have a striker who, scored 2 goals, his form's going to go up, but we also conceded 4 goals. So, maybe my central defender, his form will go down.
100%. Yep. It's a player level. Yeah.
Another question from Sydney Cove. If piggybacking off of that, if a player has a good game individually, but the team loses, so again, in that striker example, scores 2, but we lose 4-2, would his form drop, or was his increase at a lesser rate than it would have if they would have won?
Yeah, so in that case, the player can have, people can win man of the match and still lose the game. That means they're on form. So we don't want to impact players' form too much based on the team result. It's more of an individual basis. Generally speaking, if your team wins, it's likely most of your players had a better game. So you can generally look at that as an indicator as to what the form's going to do. But it definitely can, your players' form can increase when the team still loses. But if your team's lost, there's going to be some players there that have lost form because someone didn't do their job as well as they could have.
Is there a limit to the club size that we'll be able to have? Like, could I have 50 people on one club?
Yeah, so it is something that we're still determining on that end. I want to kind of replicate, a squad that you would take to the World Cup, for example. Mm-hmm. So there will be a limit to who would be signed to that specific club, and yeah, so that area still needs to be fleshed out just a little bit. But yeah, if you can think about it, kind of like, okay, this is the squad that's being announced. It's obviously got enough for 2 full teams basically. with substitutions. But then it's likely that um, it's going to be detrimental to not play those players,
Mhm.
right? Like players want to be played, players need to be played in order to be on form in those big matches. So you're going to have to strategically have the right amount of people in that side. That's optimal um, for a team.
Would in terms of now like the actual gameplay itself, and totally understand, if you're not at a place to talk about this yet, so no pressure there. But will I be able to make substitutions on the fly? Will players become fatigued? Will I need to be aware of that, or can I have kind of the same lineup if I'm liking it? And form, is continuing to go well, match over match.
Yeah, so everything strategically that happens needs to happen before that whistle blows to
Okay.
start the game. Yeah, we one of the things that we want to replicate or not replicate. One of the things that we're trying to create is the experience of sitting back and sweating out a game. Like a
Yeah.
really intense game and watching it and enjoying that. So it's simulated sport on demand. We can't have people having to make strategic decisions on the fly, relying on internet connections and things like that. This is very much going to be, you've made your strategic decisions based on the discovery process that you've had. Now you need to sit back and watch it play out. So those substitutions will happen during the game, but you've already decided when that's all going to happen beforehand.
Mhm.
So with regards to fatigue, again, this is going to be something that you're going to have to discover. Yes, there will be fatigue. Um, who fatigues the most? Where does that have the biggest impact? And those are the people that you're going to likely have to substitute beforehand. But before you go and you play a game for real money, or play in a big tournament, it's likely you're going to have a few games under your belt and already have a little bit of an idea of what you need to do. And then it's just refining that process. You could very well just have an all-star team running from beginning to end all the way. There's not going to be any injuries involved, but it's always going to be optimal to have one or two substitutions at least.
What will that um the actual presentation of the game look like? Is this going to be text based? Will there be, circles moving around on the screen? Will there be any sort of visual element? What is that going to look?
Yeah, well, we want to replicate watching a game of football as closely as possible. So, like we, you're 100% going to be able to sit and watch a game of football as close as possible as we can get it to the FIFA experience as possible. That's
Wow.
not going to be like real life, like watching it on,
Yeah.
EPL. But if you could imagine, if you could sort of set your expectations a little bit lower than than FIFA, I suppose,
Sure.
but around about that level, much higher than stick figures and random simulate. It needs to be exciting. It needs to be immersive. This whole sports platform is not going to work if it's not immersive. And that so we're trying really hard. We could whip out something pretty quickly if we were just going to be doing, you know, real basic implementation of the game itself, because Muzzle Run it already brings so much of the technical and front end aspects already. Like
Yeah.
the football replicate is replication of Muzzle Run with a few little tweaks. But your coaches are your breeders, your players are your greyhounds. So it's all there. So the game is one of the biggest parts that's probably not holding it back, but it's going to take some time because we want to make sure that it's awesome. We want to make sure that everyone's really enjoying watching it.
Where a question from Henchman Sports. Could you please ask Tom whereabouts in Q2 you see the launch of this title?
Yeah, I mean, we've communicated that it'll be before the end of Q2, and we're putting our head down, and we're not really coming up for air over the Christmas break to
Okay.
work as hard as we can
Wow.
to get it to you as soon as we possibly can. But that's all we can probably promise at this point, just to set expectations, as we've discovered through building Muzzle Run over the last year and a half, that there's always curveballs that come along our way. We're making great progress, and you'll start to see some teasers coming out shortly.
Yeah.
And
Great.
one of the great things about this the world we live in today is there's a lot of help. We don't really need to wait on 3D designers and stuff. There are so many assets that we can utilize as a small team that we can put together to really create this experience that we want to really high quality, provided we're really picky and we have the ability to edit those. So like yeah, it's not we're not talking like years away, but I think by the end of Q2 is a safe bet to say you'll have your fully immersive 3D football experience.
Oh, that's incredible. Um, there's an estimated price. We talked about this earlier in the stream about 10,000 froth to mint.
Mm.
Menacing Mouse asks, how much to mint a player?
A player, it's going to be 15 Matic, so the equivalent in froth
Okay.
is 15 Matic. So right now, that's 1,500 froth.
Okay. And then Henchman Sports also asks, will goalies have different attributes than other players? Reaction, hands, positioning, kicking, etc.
Well, one of the discovery processes is figuring out how, like, is this player actually a defender or is he a goalie? Like, when you get your player's card, he can play certain. There's an indicator of different positions that he could play. So we don't outright say this is your goalie. You need to discover that he's actually your goalie.
Oh.
So there's a lot under the hood, but there's nothing on the front end that's going to be like, oh, he's your goalie and his diving ability and his reach and all of that, those other things. That's not going to be too much to give away there.
That's exciting. That'll be fun to discover. Galaxy Racing asks, there's another, I'll say, prominent football-based NFT project out there. In your view, your opinion, what is your biggest differentiator? What sets you apart from them?
Probably the two things that I mentioned earlier is the simplified process. So it's not going to be a complex thing to get your head around. I want people that understand soccer to be able to enter a team and play really, really quickly without too much of the mucking around, basically. Just we want it to be simplified, a simplified process. It's that the other football games that are out there, Web3 and not Web3 based, have their place, because some people want that complex nature. They really want different areas where they can really get into the nuts and bolts and things like that. So we're not really trying to compete with them directly, but we're just trying to create a more simplified version. And then on top of that, as well, as we genuinely believe that we're going to create a really, really fun game based on the strategic gaming decisions that we make along the way. The tournaments are going to be fun. They're going to be exciting to be involved in. There's going to be build-up, and there's going to be that anticipation of your team playing, and then sitting back and watching that immersive game unfold before you. Which I think a lot of these other ones focus a lot on the strategy and not so much on the final delivery of that actual game itself. And that's because we're not just looking at soccer. We're looking at multiple different sports along the way. And if we're going to be doing that, we can't make everything super complex, because then you're not going to get much crossover between players between different sports. If someone's playing greyhound racing, we want them to be able to understand and start playing soccer really, really quickly without getting too involved in the nuts and bolts of things.
Love that. Very, very cool. And you've proven it out with Muzzle Run already. So hope those next steps just become easier and easier for you. Dave the Bowler asks about stats. So if I've got my team, you've got a team, I think I've discovered, who my goalkeeper is. Will you be able to have visibility to say, hey, that player started in goal for 10 matches and he did really well. I need a goalkeeper. Can I get him? Or will that be more kind of individualistic?
No, so it will be public information, because the secondary market is something that we definitely want to promote. We want people to be able to sell these assets if they decide to, for one reason or another. And that's a massive part of it. So yeah, I guess one of the reasons why we ended up building the stats in-house was the fact that we're going to be utilizing those again. We're going to be utilizing those same components and the same ideas around them for the football.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see the same sort of execution of the stats for the greyhounds as you will for the football, and that'll all sort of mold into one one part of the ecosystem.
Wonderful. Very cool. Very cool. Menacing Mouse asks, how will queuing for matches be like? Will you be going into blind, unknown opponents? Will you be able to see who is sitting in match waiting to be filled? I think of 1v1s in Muzzle, you can see who's already in the race.
Yeah, yeah. So there's obviously different game formats available. So you've got just your friendly 1v1s, and you're going to be able to see who's waiting for a 1v1, and you can decide whether or not to play them. And that is a strategic decision that you may consider quite heavily, because you're wanting to play certain players, certain teams, and that to see how you fare. Then you've got your group matches, and that's basically just a whole bunch of players entering their teams, and it's not going to make much of a difference to you as to, like, it's not like this specific team or anything. You've got a mixture of a whole different players all entering, and then that'll just kick off as soon as there's the right amount of players in there. And then you've got tournaments, and the tournaments are going to be 1v1 knockouts, playing, which is going to be a draw. So you get a whole bunch of teams that enter into the tournament, and then there's a draw, and then they play out.
Oh, that's fun.
So
That's
a
going to
bit
be
of
a
a
lot of
mixture
fun.
of everything.
Yeah. Get some of that Champions League anticipation in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Tom, I just want to say, thank you for the time tonight. This has been awesome. We're right at the hour mark right now. Chat, thank you so much for the questions. And we got one last one from Sydney Cove. Chat, this will be the last one we get for tonight before we close out, because I think it's a good one. Will there be both paid and free 1v1 friendly matches? Also, can a single player still play for money?
Yep. So there is the free and paid racing. So there'll be free, paid racing. Certain goes in tournaments, exactly the same as Muzzle Run.
Perfect.
But at this point, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to enter a paid race with just a single player, a paid game with just a single player. You'll need a side, like a whole team, in order
That
to
makes
do
sense.
100%. We'll be launching off the bat with paids.
Oh, fantastic. Very, very cool. Well, chat, again, thank you for the questions. I got to give a shout out to Menacing Mouse, Fab Spark, Andy Ice Gaming, Shimo182. I butchered that so bad. I apologize. And Cypher for the follows. And Tom, thank you so much for your generous time tonight. This has been so informative. It got me very excited. I'm glad we could connect. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find you? How can they connect with you? I've got the Muzzle Run URL popping up in chat every few minutes. If people want to connect, how can they do that?
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, so muzzle.run is probably the best place to start. Along the journey of signing up, you'll get a link to our Discord. Make sure you join that, because anything that's important that happens in Muzzle Run is happening inside that Discord. And then also just muzzle_run on Twitter. That's also where a lot of the updates are going to happen. But no, thank you very much for having me, man. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty more chats. As we bring out more teasers and excitement as we build into this. It's going to happen quick. That's one thing that we pride ourselves on, is bringing these into production quickly. That's one thing I can promise you, is that this game will get into production. So the build up starts now, and anytime you want to chat, just let me know, and I'm happy to pop on. And
wonderful. I more than definitely will be having you on again. Really appreciate this. Chat, again, thank you so much. Sydney Cove, appreciate the follow, and I will see you soon with another Muzzle Run stream, no doubt about it.